Hello, I'm back. I'm looking at Jacobs' introduction to Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, the final paragraph of that introduction, um, in which she writes that says, I do this, meaning writing her slave narrative, I do this for the sake of my sisters in bondage who are suffering wrongs so foul that our ears are too delicate to listen to them. I do it with the hope of arousing conscientious and reflecting women at the North to a sense of their duty in the exertion of moral influence on the question of slavery on all possible occasions. I do it with the hope that every man who reads this narrative will swear solemnly before God, so far as he has power to prevent it, no fugitives from slavery shall ever be sent back to suffer in that loathsome den, corruption, and cruelty. She also says that in this introduction that she's writing to Northern white women. You can hear in this particular passage that I just read very formal language. This sounds like what you would expect from a white writer in this time period, not what you would expect at all from a slave. Of course, our assumptions are that slaves are uneducated and illiterate, and we talked about the fact that they are not allowed to be taught to read or write, and that's something that was actually against the law. And so we have reason to expect that she would not be able to write this way. We know that Jacob's circumstances are different. We know that she's a gifted writer when she is taught to learn, when she's taught to read and write. So her skill and talent goes beyond what we would expect anyway. This language is so accomplished and so clear and powerful a style that, as you'll recall, this actually worked against her. It caused people to believe that this text could not possibly be written by a slave. So if you were to argue in your essay that this text is autoethnographic because, first of all, she's writing to white women in the North, you could certainly use an example from the introduction to try to prove that or support that. You could certainly talk about this text as autoethnographic in that her purposes are to correct her readers in the North perceptions of what it means to be a slave. This paragraph, I think, gives us a pretty clear sense of that as well, as do many others. You could also talk about the text in its transcultural facets. So when she borrows a text, or when she borrows for her text, this standard American edited English, this formal style, this is an example of what we've called transculturation. Transculturation, of course, being where members of an oppressed or marginalized group borrow cultural elements from a dominant culture and integrate them into their own culture. In the case of autoethnography, and an autoethnography like Jacobs, she borrows that and adopts and adapts that formal style, standard edited American English for her autoethnographic text. So this is the kind of example that would help you to be able to prove or show, support a thesis that says that her text is both autoethnographic and transcultural. Many other examples like this. In fact, you could choose examples that were even more pointedly addressed to her white readers in the North. We know that she also borrows a different style, a familiar style for white women readers in the North, and that's the style of the seduction novel. If you look at your notes on slave narratives, you'll see that I've identified one of the styles that she borrows is this seduction novel. The feature that's most familiar from that particular genre of novel is the direct address to the reader. So when Harriet Jacobs says, "Oh, you white women of the North, pay attention to what I have to say. This is addressed to you. Dear readers, please know that I struggled in this way. Dear readers, know that I'm telling the truth." These are moments of direct address that she is modeling after moments in these seduction novels. Seduction novel, we know, is the story of a naive young woman who is put in the path of much more sophisticated upper class rake, who is most likely going to take advantage of her, and in many cases leave her either pregnant or leave her pregnant, and she ends up dead, dying in childbirth. So these things don't turn out very well, and have a sad ending in most cases. But along the way, the writer of that seduction novel is turning to the reader and saying, "Dear reader, no, I protected my virtue in every conceivable way, but there was nothing I could do." This comes through too, the same kind of scenario comes through with Jacobs, of course, when she decides that she's going to tell the story of being accosted by and assaulted by Dr. Flint. What she has in mind, of course, is that she believes that this is the kind of experience that wouldn't be familiar to women in the North, and that would be most likely to strike a chord with white women in the North. They would be sensitive to this kind of behavior from men, even though they wouldn't want to admit it, I'm sure, and would be especially shocking for them to learn that a prominent physician in the town is the one who is obsessed with and cannot seem to leave alone this very young 15, 16-year-old slave woman. So, again, as an example of transcultural text, we can see that she's borrowing another form, using direct address, and then choosing as her subject matter these particular kinds of incidents that she experiences with Dr. Flint, who we know he chased her as far as New York from North Carolina to try to bring her back, was that obsessed with her. Let me pause while I get to another example. Just take 1 minute.